Was war dein größtes Luxusproblem? Eines meiner größten Luxusprobleme war auf der SoundTHcCologne, da es dort unglaublich viele parallele Veranstaltungen gab und man oft nicht wusste, wohin man jetzt gehen sollte. Und wenn man sich von einer Veranstaltung den ersten Teil angeguckt hat und danach woanders hingegangen ist, habe ich zu hören bekommen, verdammt, hättest du mal den zweiten Teil auch noch gehört, der war nämlich noch viel geiler. Deswegen gibt es hier etwas Einmaliges. Ich durfte das Panel mit dem kanadischen Komponisten Michael McCann moderieren, der die Musik für die Spiele Splintercell, Deus Ex und Borderlands komponiert hat. Und hier durften wir zum ersten Mal eine Aufzeichnung machen und diese als Podcast veröffentlichen. In der ersten von 3 Folgen verrät Michael, wie viele Live-Instrumente er nutzt, wie sein erster Job verlief, was für eine Karriere er vor den Spielen hatte, wie er überhaupt in die Spieleindustrie kam, was das Konzept zur Musik in Borderlands ist und zeigt eine Sounddesign-Möglichkeit. Du hörst natürlich nur einen Ausschnitt. Zum Beispiel konnten wir die Musikbeispiele nicht mit integrieren. Allein dafür lohnt es sich natürlich, zur SoundtrackCologne persönlich zu kommen. Herzlich willkommen zu sounTHcast. Mein Name ist Tim Heinrich. Hello, now we got our third panel about game music. I got the great composer Michael McCann, who composed the music for Deus Ex, Splintercell, and for the upcoming game Borderlands 3. And you're located in Canada, Montreal. Yeah. So there are 3 kinds of music you compose: the cutscenes, the on-roll scenes, and the music for marketing campaigns. How does this start? How much the music influence the cut of the marketing campaigns? What do you get? What's the concept?
Yeah, for this project, it's kind of unusual for the in-game. It's the same in film usually too, is that the composer on the project will do the marketing as well. On this one, we had to kind of fight for it a bit. Is that they started the marketing pretty early, so I had started in 2008, and they had started marketing in I think 2008 as well. Or they started building some of the ideas. So for this trailer, they were animating it for about a year, I think in Japan, and they had early renditions of it, and they were temping in stock music, so stuff from a production house. And
so they didn't use any music of you or temp music that you have been produced before, just
no, because the game is very ambient, and there's action and there's ambient, but there's nothing that would suit this kind of trailer. So it took a while to kind of see what they were developing, and then when the audio director, Steve Shepkowski, he was hearing what they were doing, and it was kind of like, we've developed this whole sound for the game, and we've taken, by the time we got to looking at the music, like an edit where for like more final decisions were going to get made, I was further enough along in the scoring the game that he thought I should take a crack at doing the trailer. So the studio wasn't sure, because this was only my second game project, so they weren't too sure whether it was a good idea, and essentially they wanted me to do kind of like a pitch, put an idea together, put it up against picture, and then see what everybody thought. So the first thing I did had like no drums and no arps and virtually nothing, but it was just one of the thematic lines with the female voice, and compared to what they had temped in, it was completely different. And they weren't too sure, because I didn't have time, because I was on the game too, to actually do a full mock-up. So they had to kind of guess what I was going to do off of like 3 layers, like a vocal, a couple pads, and a thing. But it was mainly just the thematic line, and the audio director was like, we should let him keep on going. But they had I think it was a 2 Steps from Hell track that was already done, and it was cut to picture, and it worked, and it was great. They were done. We can just once it's finished animated, we can release it.
And that's hard to match 2 Steps from Hell.
Yeah, I think that was the problem, is because they were really attached to it. So I kind of asked Steve if I could take a month and actually sit down with it and actually, let's do this properly. And he was cool. He was pretty cool with it, because we kind of took away from the game. But then when I delivered that, then they were like, okay, this they really liked it, and then they were like, let's go this direction, is that you're doing all the marketing. and we'll keep the same composer for everything. So.
So first you've written the music for the marketing campaign,
Yeah.
and then the music for the game.
Yeah, we did 15 trailers, I think, over 2 years. And then, all the game and the cutscenes and the on-rail kind of walks. And so 100% of everything except some of the radio music in the background, which was, there was like a pirate radio station where they had used, I think, stuff from the first Deus Ex from the 90s as kind of just, as a kind of like a reference back to it. So, yeah.
When I ask some people what kind of question would you like to hear from Michael McCann, a lot of people ask me, how much live instruments do you use? Is there just virtual instruments? Do you play real guitar? Do you hire musicians? I guess we heard the vocal singer. How much real instruments do you use or do we hear?
I generally, this one, there's like the singer here is a mix of library and also Ariel Engel, who's some people might know from Broken Social Scene, and she does some solo stuff now, but her voice had I was looking for like a Lisa Gerrard tone, which is kind of fairly low register, and tried a couple female vocalists, and then there was a library, and I don't know which one it was, but it had one that was close, and she was almost matched it identically, so there's a lot of Melodyne kind of going in and trying to, at least in the lead, is kind of match and then double, and trying to get the vocal to do some, because I generally work, even if it's live, I have a habit of recording a lot of material and then cutting it all into pieces and then reassembling. I don't think I've ever, even for stuff like if I play guitar or piano, I've never, I don't think, played something and then left it alone. There's usually, it's constantly editing and correcting and kind of manipulating. And
so what kind of instruments do you play?
I play, guitar, bass, not well, drums a lot better, and percussion and piano.
Do you play them alone, or do you like to layer them with other instruments? Are there some methods where you can say that's the Michael McCann sound?
I tend to layer. I think it's interesting to listen to Will and Jack call, because I think I come from, Jack's done a lot of electronic stuff too, but I primarily came from the electronic side, so breakbeat and hip hop and synthwave, and no academic training, no orchestral training. So even doing something like this was the first time I kind of had to figure out how to make this kind of music. So it was kind of trying to deconstruct. Because I think this was just the beginning. It was kind of like the Tron era, so it was just when the hybrid stuff was kind of peaking. So there was a lot of synth and orchestral hybrid stuff. So I tend to take projects that I'm not really qualified for, and then figure out how to make it work.
What has been your start into the business? Into the game business, because you had another business, you had two careers. Now you got the game music career. But you had another career before this.
I started with albums primarily, working under pseudonyms, so kind of like solo album work, which is kind of more Chemical Brothers, like Prodigy, Moby, Massive Attack, so trip hop and breakbeat, and that's what I first started doing. And then from the solo albums, I started licensing out a lot of the music to TV and advertising. And that was in the 90s. And then that led to doing custom work. So I'd get asked to do, if there was something that wasn't like perfect and something that I had written that was on an album, but they wanted that style, then they would call me and then do custom work. But I was doing sound design work in movies as well. So that was a kind of a secondary thing. But then eventually, after having done some like TV, like opening credit sequences and advertising and stuff, I got an agent, and that led to Ubisoft and Splinter Cell. And that's an interesting story, because Jack had said that he doesn't know any composers that started with a AAA game, and that was my first game, so and it wasn't easy. I think that game that was the fourth Splinter Cell, so there was Splinter Cell, then Pandora Tomorrow, then Chaos Theory, which was Eamon Tobin, and then the fourth one. So when I had this agent, and they had a whole bunch of composers, and there was really big names. When I saw the list, I was like, oh, holy shit. Like, there's absolutely no way I'm going to get this. But they're like, yeah, just the music direction was really specific, and it wasn't. Eamon Tobin's was kind of breakbeat, and I don't know how to describe his style. And I'm a huge fan, so it was intimidating. But Pandora Tomorrow's pretty more, I guess, orchestral. It's a little more traditional. But the audio director was this Parisian guy who lived in Shanghai with his family. I think his wife was from China, and yeah, he was a French guy living there. And he had this idea that he wanted a Splinter Cell game to have a soundtrack that was more like Daniel Lanois and Brian Eno. And he had like Neil Young's Dead Man as a reference, and some of Brian Eno's ambient albums. And so he wanted this really like acoustic, like stuff like slide guitar and acoustic drums, so it'd all be brush drums. And so when I did the pitch, I brought in a slide guitar player, a guy, Graham Playford, in Montreal. And we basically sat for 2 days and created this really weird hybrid of like acoustic kind of southern US kind of like blues mixed with my style of ambient and breakbeat. And I guess when we sent it in is that out of everybody that had this direction of using kind of guitar, they had sent something. I think a lot of the guys were doing stuff that was really literal. And me and Graham took it more like a band, is like, let's produce something that's just kind of, that's listenable as a song, as opposed to a piece of score. And I guess that, Romain, I guess he was like, this is what I'm talking about. So.
And when you started to compose, did you match the expectations from?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a funny story, because yeah, I hadn't done any games at all. I didn't know anything about interactive music. I didn't know anything about how the engine worked, and I knew absolutely nothing. So this guy Romain flies in because he knew I was really nervous, and he's like, "I'll hire you." I had to convince Ubisoft to take you on because they don't know who the hell you are and you have no experience in games. And he's like, "I'll fly down to Montreal and I'm going to bring kind of like the system and I'm going to sit down and kind of show you." So he brought down his laptop, and on his laptop he had this. It was like a character in a gymnasium. It was like a white gymnasium, and he had this system built where he had some music he had done, and he's like, basically what I want to do, I want 24 layers of music, and those 24 layers are stacked vertically from the most ambient to action music. And as you kind of work through this gymnasium and he kind of moves the camera around, he's like, and he brings in like an enemy, he's like, as I move this camera around towards the enemy in a way and towards light and darkness, all these layers kind of trigger and move the music around. And yeah, I was like, oh, I'm so fucked. Like, yeah.
So it's been crossfading between different layers.
Yeah, he had developed, I think it was at that time, one of the more sophisticated engines, because I remember there was a guy, Simon Pressey, at Ubisoft in Montreal, who I think they had done Chaos Theory with Eamon Tobin. They did 4 layers. So when I told him that this Romain guy was doing a 24-layer system that was tied to stuff like lighting and water, and he was like, no, I don't buy it. But it was a different studio, so Romain was working out of Shanghai. So yeah, so Romain, he's kind of an interesting guy because he's like a mad scientist, and his music references are, he'll go to like Cuba, he'll go to a bar and he'll hear something and record like the snare on a band that he likes, and then he'll bring it and he'll send it to me and be like this snare. Like really specific, like, yeah, very cool, and very cool kind of eclectic taste. So, yeah, so from that point, we had a long discussion, and I did some kind of temp stuff when he was there, trying to figure out what he meant. It's like if you have 24 layers stacked, that means that if you have a chord change in the ambient, that the chord change has to stack all the way up to the action. And he was like, not really. And he's like, he didn't really want it that clean. But he said somewhat is that if you kind of build an arrangement in the ambient, it kind of has to flow with the action, but he had ideas of how to maneuver from the ambient into a tension state. So that's atonal, and then move up to the action, and then back down to that state, and then into the ambient. So it was interesting how it was thought out, but I think I spent about a month trying to figure out how to write in that system, and it wasn't working, and he was getting really stressed out.
And they trusted you and said, well, we believe in you,
yeah.
You will find the right way.
No, I think after a month he was like, I think we got a problem, so Because I was trying to wrap my head, and I couldn't talk to anybody that understood what he was trying to. At the time, I don't think that quite got what he was doing, and I didn't know anybody in games except for one guy at Ubisoft Montreal. And I kind of had a panic attack, and then came back to it, and it took like a week, but I was like, you can get it. So just work and work and work, just 7 days, like 24 hours a day, and something's going to come out of this. And it worked. After 7 days, whatever I hit was like, he was like, bang on. I was like, okay, cool. He's like, now do that like 11 times. For a year and a half. So.
Okay, can we listen to some music or to the trailer?
Sure, yeah.
Great. So you got a wide range of other genres, and here of this big action music, I guess I hear a lot of rooms. So I guess one kind of effects you like is to work with reverbs and great rooms and.
Yeah, well, it's weird because the trailer stuff is, I think, I could play other stuff. The trailer stuff is generally kind of off the mark. I think ambient's usually kind of where I'm at. And I think, I do a lot of heavy effects work. And it's interesting because I think coming from that side into soundtrack, I was always trying to figure out how to do the mix of coming from something that might be kind of like say that's like heavy electronic production, but in a pop sense, but bring it into soundtrack. And I think when I was younger, one of the first soundtracks that caught my ear was Peter Gabriel's Last Temptation of Christ soundtrack. And that was a big influence because he had done something somewhat similar to how I work, where he had done a whole bunch of source recordings of live musicians. I think he went through the Middle East, but he brought in Nezrat Fateh Ali Khan and Yesun N'Dour, if I'm pronouncing that right. But he brought in a whole bunch of live musicians, and then he went and he fed a lot of it into Akai samplers, and then reconstructed a lot of what he had recorded, and then took a bunch of electronic stuff and kind of put it over and intermixed it on top, which is similar to how I'll generally, if I do bring in, say like on Splinter Cell, I should play an example eventually, but when I had the guitarist Graham, we were kind of co-writing, but a lot of his stuff is I would record an hour and a half of us kind of experimenting in this ambient or in an action or a tension cue, and then take all that recording and then break it into a whole bunch of pieces and then bring it and reconstruct it back together into something else. And I think that has to do with working from like effects point of view a bit.
Yes.
Because I find if you have a guitar and if I'm using, I love tape delay. Kind of in that Radiohead way where you're kind of allowing the delay to kind of feedback and build.
It's very nice to write the delay and turn the feedback up and down a little bit so it never stops, but it changes the sound.
Yeah, it's kind of letting it kind of do its thing and it's letting it kind of flow, but then taking that, what it's doing, recording that as like a wave file and then bringing it back with the original guitar and then taking those effects and then merging them back into the guitar. So you get these kind of weird performances that you probably couldn't play live, but sound organic because it's usually because there's enough effects that it covers up like edits and changes. But yeah, anyway, it's kind of a long. I think it's why I do so few projects is because even on Borderlands, I've been on it for 18 months, and a lot of it is production. Like there's composition, but a lot of it is just it's effects and programming and yeah. I have a few. I brought. Yeah, that's a really good question. And a lot of that's I think what we were talking about is the integration is a big part of that. Because I think what he was looking for was that, especially in the writing process, was that he was looking for whether what I was writing would work for what he had built. So in my mind, I'm thinking, I know what he's looking for, and I get the technical understanding of what he's saying, but the creative side, I think he's just waiting for me to hit on something that he's like, that's what I'm talking about. I think that's what took a while, because I'd write stuff that he would like, but he's like, it's not going to work in the system.
Was it really 24 layers though?
Yeah, I think we did 12 and 24. If I brought something with me, and it was for Xbox 360, so that was I forget what engine they were working on, but yeah. So I don't have the combat, but I have the stress and the infiltration. So this is the ambient. That's 15. but there's a couple duplicates. So, and then stress, and this is just one loop. This is like a 45-second a loop. So yeah, so there's 16 in the stress and then 16, I think, in the ambient, and those stacked on, so that's 32. Yeah.
Are they all the same piece?
No, I think he had voice limitations too. But I know that when I played through, because I knew everything that he was playing was separate. So if I listened to the game and he was moving from, actually, that's a good example to show. If he's moving from, in the game, if I hear going from ambient to stress, and it's at 100%, which everything is playing, then it's got to be at the minimum 16 layers. Somewhere between 16 and 24.
So you're playing like individual stems.
Yeah, they're all individual voiced, but they're kind of stacked. It would sound like this is pretty long, but I'll give you an example.
Das war der erste von 3 Teilen. Auf der SoundtrackCologne hat Michael McCann natürlich jetzt direkt das Beispiel gezeigt, was wir hier aus rechtlichen Gründen leider nicht machen können. Wenn du das Ganze live erleben möchtest, dann komm 2020 auf die SoundtrackCologne 17, und zwar vom 22. bis 25. April. Im zweiten Teil zeigt Michael McCann, welche Audiofiles er verschickt, wie seine Excel-Tabelle aussieht, wie viel Zeit er für die Komposition von Borderlands 3 hatte und was der Unterschied zwischen Games und TV-Musik ist. Du möchtest mit mir oder anderen über die einzelnen Folgen sprechen? Dann schick mir einfach eine Nachricht per E-Mail oder komm in die Facebook-Gruppe. Wenn du noch weiteren kostenlosen Content haben möchtest, wie Samples oder Zusammenfassungen, dann abonniere einfach den Newsletter und du bekommst kostenlos mein E-Book mit 45 Einnahmequellen für Musiker. Die Links findest du in den Shownotes.